Hello and welcome to 4-5's Design. This video is the first of two showing you how to make coffee filter roses. I didn't think I would do a video on roses because there are many out there. However, I couldn't see any that showed you how to do leaves as well as sepals and rose buds as well as fully open flowers. So in this first video I'm going to show you how to make a basic rose, and it's a technique that I've developed that will give you consistent results. You can then take that technique and adapt it with different colours, styles and shapes to make the sort of roses that you wish. So this first video I'm going to show you how to make what I would call the basic rose, like this one here. And as I've mentioned, it includes leaves and sepals, and I'll also show you how to make the bud. And then in the second video I'll show you how to use that same technique to make different styles of roses, like this that I'm calling the hybrid tea. This one I'm calling the floribunda rose, and this one I'm calling the Valentine's rose, because it was based on a rose that I had from my husband on Valentine's Day. And of course, once you've practiced the techniques and understand what to do, you can then use a whole different variety of colours to get different styles of roses. This one is my favourite, where I've blended pink and green to get this lovely bouquet. So let's get started. So we're going to make the leaves and the sepals now. Easy to do. This time I've prepared a pattern for you that I think you'll be able to print off. I've put this in the description of the video. Overall, to do a range of roses, you've got two different styles of sepals. That's what I'm calling the basic sepal. That's the more advanced. And this one here is if you're going to do a rose bud. And then there are three different sizes of leaves, so you can make a combination of larger and smaller array of leaves. For this basic rose, I'm going to use that basic sepal that I've got here and the smaller one, so I can show you how to do a rose bud. So what I would normally do is take my pattern, cut it out ready, fold up a couple of layers of coffee filters. For the sepals I tend to draw around them and cut them out, and for the sepals you just want one layer of coffee filter patterns to do your sepals. And for the leaves, I tend to, when I cut them out, I tend to place them in twos on my baking sheet ready for dyeing with the icing gel dye. So you've got your three different layers, different sizes of leaves, two different styles of sepal. But for this one, use your basic sepal and do probably several sizes of rose leaves. For the colours, I'm doing two variations of colours. Well, actually on this one I'm going to do a third just to show you. I'm going to do a basic green, a dark green, as you can see here. And for that, I'm using the Wilton Leaf Green icing gel, mixed half and half with black. And I'm also going to do, because roses also have this lovely dark, rich, violety, coppery colour. And for that, I'm mixing the Wilton violet with the Wilton brown colour. For that, I tend to put probably 1.5 measures of violet to 1 measure of brown, and just to give it a little bit of extra depth this time, I've added a tiny little bit of leaf green just to give it that really rich colour. But for both of these, I mix them in my little tray in the right quantities, add a little bit of water to dilute them, and then just to fix the colour so it doesn't run too much, I just add in a tiny little drop of basic glue. This is the cheapest PVA glue I can get at my local supermarket for children to use. So it doesn't need to be anything special, it just needs to fix your colour for you. So I'll just show you with this last sepal, and this size sepal is what I would use to make a bud. And I'm painting it on quite thickly. It will lighten as it dries, but I don't mind if it's that dark green anyway. And then I'll just show you, I've shown you the colour of the violet and the brown. What I'm just going to try now is, I was looking at some roses the other day and they were starting to come out dark green and were beginning to change to that lovely deep violety brown colour. So I'm just going to try now. I've already put some of the dark green on, and I'm just going to mix in some of that violet colour. So I've got leaves that have started off green and are changing to that violet colour. So they're going to have a little bit of both. I'll have to see whether I like it when I've done it, and you can judge for yourself. But as always, what I tend to do is look at what's actually happening in nature. When I'm walking around, walking the dogs, look over people's gardens and see what's happening to their flowers. Or if I go through the park, just see what's coming into bloom and make a note of that. So for that one then, it's got a combination of the both. And I'm going to see whether I like that as a finished product. I might just blend it with a little bit of water, just so it looks a little bit more realistic. There you go. Either way, whatever colour combination you choose, before you start to assemble your roses, I'd concentrate on making a good supply of sepals and leaves so that it's easy for you to assemble. So once your leaves have dried, and this is a technique I've used before, if I can find my little, I've lost my wire. How rude. Once your leaves have dried, it's quite a simple method to assemble them. For these, I've done 2 layers of coffee filters together. This isn't quite dry yet, but you can peel them apart once they are fully dry. You put 1 layer of your leaf down, put on your wire, glue it using whichever glue you've got, and as a bit of advice, I tend to use a bit of super glue just on the very base where the stem and the leaf meet, just to secure it. And I found this Gorilla Glue is fantastic because it comes with a little brush at the end, which is ideal for this. So just put a tiny bit on just to secure that. So you've then got your leaf with your wire, and then you put another leaf over the top, and I tend to use Mod Podge then to seal that whole leaf, so that you then end up with a leaf that looks like this. And dependent on what sort of style you're going for, you can then arrange them either like this, and for this one I used 3 the same size. For this one I used a combination of the larger leaf, 2 medium size and 2 small. Or you can do what I'm going to do now for you, is to use a medium size leaf and 2 small leaves to construct your leaf ready to assemble to your rose when you've done them. What I've done first with these roses is to just add a little detail, apologies for the state of my fingers here, a bit of vein detail. And having tried a few things, I still find it best to use a pencil and to add that detail. And on a medium sized leaf like this, you probably only need 5 little veins that are going along the top, but the pencil gives you the shape without anything too severe. Here I used a felt pen, a very, very fine artist felt pen. I don't like it as much as using the pencil, but either way, whatever you prefer, add your vein detail to both these sizes, and then to assemble them I'm going to use some stem tape. And first of all, I'll put my 2 smaller leaves together. I lay them over top of the larger leaf, and I'm just going to judge where I need them to be. With rose leaves, the leaves attach very closely to the stem, and the bottom leaves are very close to the top, so you're not looking at something that looks like that. It's more like that. So when I've got them in position, spin them around and hold them in place there, and I'm going to use a piece of stem tape. I tend to cut my stem tape in half, and I want to get a really nice seal at the top. And flower arrangers everywhere are going to be screaming now at the way I use this stem tape, because what you would normally do is twist and pull your stem tape all the way down, and it's a little bit pear-shaped here. In fact, I'm going to take that piece off and start again. Add your stem tape, twist and pull your stem tape so that it is covering the stem all the way down to the bottom of your leaves. So you've now got your little arrangement of 3 leaves all on top of each other. And if you take the top one and move it like that, and move that one like that, you've then got your little shape of rose leaves. And as I've said, you can do 5. That's what it looks like if you do all 3 all together. You could of course do a large one and 2 of these medium sized. It's entirely up to you. I quite like the little ones, I must admit, and I quite like the ones that are all the same size. But if you do a variety, then you can see what looks most realistic for the rose that you are doing. The other detail, apart from the veining that I've tried to work on, is that serrated edge that roses have. And I've tried a couple of methods. And when I've done hydrangea leaves before, I've done something very meticulous, where I've gone down, if I show you down this leaf here, to give you an idea, I've cut it 90 degrees. This is larger than it would need to be, just to show you, 90 degrees like that, and then come back and snipped down to create a serrated edge. I'm hoping you can see that. I'm cutting this while looking at it through my phone, so it's not so easy to do. Now that's obviously far too large for a rose leaf, but I've just done that to give you an idea. So you cut at 90 degrees and then snip back at a diagonal angle. I've tried to do the same here at the top, but a lot smaller, and it's okay, but it's very, very fiddly. You have to have good light and good eyesight, which I haven't got either at the moment. But I've tried a technique. When I looked at the edge of a rose, it wasn't quite as uniform as that. It was a little bit raggedy. So what I did on this side is to simply snip at random angles along the edge, just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit one way, and then go back and do the same the other way, just randomly snipping. So I'm not actually looking at what I'm doing, but while I'm doing that, it's sort of creating that raggedy, jaggedy edge. I don't know whether you can see it on this one. Perhaps it looked a little bit neater than what I've just done, because I was concentrating on it. It was a lot simpler than trying to do the trying to do the one that I did on hydrangea. But it still gives you that little bit of a raggedy edge that's so reminiscent of a realistic rose. So I'll leave that up to you. I think it still looks nice if you just have the plain leaf with no variations. This is the one that I did where I was trying to do it really precisely. It's perhaps a little bit too spiky, if I'm honest. And then that's the one that I've just done with a very simple, unscientific, raggedy edge. Either way, get yourself a little production line going, as I've said in other videos. Get yourself several sepals ready to go, several combinations of leaves, so that when you come to construct your roses, you can just reach out for them and finish off quite simply. Okay, we're going to start with the basic rose, and I've included a pattern for the rose in the description of this video, together with some written instructions for you. The pattern includes patterns for all of the 4 roses that will be done over the course of both of these videos. I found that they do print out to scale. The link I had to copy into a Word or other document, and then once I clicked in the link from that Word document, I was able to download it and print it off, and it came out to scale on a size A4 paper. So I'm hoping that will be the same for you. If you know of a way to do it better than that, I'm happy to have your suggestions, but at least I can share this pattern instructions with you. So the other thing I thought we'd talk about before we actually started was dyeing the coffee filters themselves. And I've just given you a few examples of coffee filter sheets that I've pre-dyed, because for these roses, rather than cutting out each petal and dyeing them separately, I pre-dye the sheets of coffee filters. I use Wilton icing gel, and for the majority I tend to use the colours that are in this pack. You can get them individually, but I think this pack colours most colours. I think the only additional ones that I've brought are a brown, which I use quite a lot, and at Christmas I used a Christmas red that I brought separately. Otherwise it's a good starting pack, this one. So in order to dye your coffee filters, you put a little blob, and I'm talking about half a thumbnail, in some water to dilute it. Scrunch all your coffee filters up, dunk them in the water, squeeze them dry, lay them flat on a baking sheet, and I dry these in an oven at 175. Is that F or C? 175? But what you can do is just play around with the colours. I just wanted to show you some here. I wanted to show you this one because although it looks uneven, makes it ideal for doing things like flowers. I don't know if you can see there on the edge, the colour is collected. So when you come to cut out your petals, you can use that to your advantage and place the edge of your petal pattern on the edge of the coffee filter, and then you get that little bit of detail on the edge of your petals. Here's one that I did sort of tie-dyed, so I mixed a combination of pink and green. The green, I put the tiniest little tiny blob. In fact, I think I just dipped my edge of my finger into the icing gel and then mixed it in the water, so it was very, very pale. I dipped these in pink first and then folding them up and dipped the edge in the green so that it soaked up some of that colours. And that's what got me the colours, that's what got this pattern of these roses here. So where you've got the pink and the pale green together. I love that look. But you can do whatever colours you like, make them your own. The other one I just wanted to show you is where, if you don't thoroughly mix your gel in the water, this is another happy accident I had, it comes out with these veins. Well, how wonderful are they to use when you're doing petals of flowers? So play around with your colours. Do yourself a big stash of colours. As you can see here, I tend to spend an hour dyeing lots of colours, so I've got plenty to play with. So in addition to your coffee filters, all pre-dyed, you need the patterns themselves, and I tend to cut out the patterns in cardboard or thick paper and then cut out the required number of petals for the flower that you're going to do. You'll need some kind of stem. I've used both of these types. The first one is what you use in the garden to hold up plants that might be dripping, and probably my favourite is this plastic coated wire. It has a thinner end and then this plastic coating. That's good because you can then bend the stem if you wish to shape it. Either way, you need some sort of stem. You then need to make sure you've got your sepal pre-made and your leaves all ready to go, and a little bit of stem tape to attach those, and of course you'll need some sort of adhesive. I'll be using a hot glue gun because it dries instantly. I tend to have a little bit of craft glue on hand with a brush just in case I need it, because sometimes the hot glue by definition is quite hot to work with. So I'm going to show you now step by step how to make this basic rose, and with this particular colour scheme what you'll end up with is a rose that looks like that. We're going to start with the central core, and for this you need a piece of kitchen roll, and I've cut my piece of kitchen roll about 1 inch wide, and I've cut it then from corner to corner. So I've then got 2 elongated triangle shapes, and this is what we're going to use to make that central core. If you want a fatter core, or if you're doing a bud, you might want to use both of these, but one is probably quite sufficient for what we need. So take a little bit of glue, and for this I'm going to use craft glue, and you'll see why as I go along. Place your glue on the end. Just move you around a little bit there. And you're going to roll that kitchen roll down your stem. You want to keep that edge flat with the edge that you're rolling up, and part way through you might wish to add a little bit of glue just so that it's adhered to the stem properly, and you'll need a little bit of glue at the end, and then just continue to roll that along. And as you can see, what's happening is you're getting a shape where it is thicker at the bottom than it is at the top, giving you that sort of central, almost bud-like shape. And what I tend to do, just grab a little bit of glue on my finger and sculpt that a little bit, just so that it's tidy and smooth. So you've then got your central core. So once you've completed your central core, we just need to cover that up. So you use petal pattern number 1, cut 2 pieces out and glue them together just at the top, one on top of another. Then open them out so you've got a little heart shape. Turn it over, and if you've got a little extra bit, just snip that off. And we're now going to apply that in the middle, and then we're going to wrap that over. And what we're looking for is that top end, what we're looking for there is for that top end to be covered and to get that nice overlap. Can you see there how we've got that little crease that looks like lots of petals all together? So I'm just going to stick that on now and make sure it's fully stuck to that central core, because we don't want it sliding off. So I'm making sure my glue glues those petals to that central core, taking care not to burn my fingers. So we've got that nice, neat little section. What I tend to do here is snip that little extra bit off. So I've got a neat section at the bottom, because that's going to be my guide to where I place my subsequent layers. So that's the first layer. The second layer, use petal pattern size number 2, and we need 4 of these. And what we're going to do with these is to glue them so that they are level with the top of that inner bud there. And because we want it to be quite tightly wrapped around that inner bud, we're going to apply the glue about 3/4 of the way towards the top. It might be easier once you've measured out where you are to apply your glue to that inner core, and that's what I'm going to do here. So this is equivalent to about 3/4 of the way up that petal. So that's firmly attached now. Can you see that it's the top is level, but it's not joined? And then that will then need to be wrapped around so that it's glued into position. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue there and there. This is where using a hot glue gun can be quite tricky. And what you're trying to do is get that inner core, move you along a little bit like that inner core covered, but you want a little bit of gap to build up the shape. I do apologise, trying to get this angle to where the camera is the most difficult thing of this whole construction. So that's the first flower, first petal applied. The second one you apply in the same way, and that you're going to apply your glue about 3/4 of the way up, and you're going to overlap that first petal by about half. So where the edge of that petal is there is about halfway along that first petal, and again you want to try and get it level with the top. So I'm going to apply my glue about 3/4 of the way from the top, and again that's going to be wrapped around that central section. I'm going to glue as I go. Can you see how we're building up the layers of that rose? We'll do the same with the third one. So in the middle of that petal we've just put on, and I'm going to apply a little bit of glue there as well, about halfway along, 3/4 the way up, and on goes that third petal, and again it's wrapped around. And then the final petal, I'm just going to you see how it's building up there? It's not too tight. And then the final one, again, halfway along that, 3/4 of the way down, is where you're going to stick it. And on goes that final petal. And this time I'm going to make sure that I'm not sticking it too tightly, and I'm going to do a final little flourish just to enhance this by curling the top bit of that petal down just a little bit before I stick the base. We've then got, can you see how it's building up with that central core and then the next layer? So it's looking like the layers of the rose. Why you need to make sure it's sort of reasonably tight. I'll show you if it looks, when it looks odd if you don't. Can you see this one here where I did the central core and then the next layer, apart from the fact that it's the wrong colour for the other petals, and then the rest of the petals are quite distant and it just looks really odd. So that's why you wrap that second layer reasonably snugly around that core. So then we now move on to the next layer, and this is where we begin to build up the shape of the rose. So use petal pattern number 3, and you need 4 of these. And a bit like what I've just done with that final petal, I'm going to add a bit of detail. You can see the pattern in that petal from the die. So I'm just going to roll that down there. So each one of these has curled in that corner. And this time I'm going to follow those patterns on as though we were doing the next pattern in that previous layer. And I'm going to apply the glue this time to the base. Again, about halfway along the last petal, but it's going to the base of the rose. And what I'm making sure is that that bottom part of the petal is flat and the top is. What you don't want to do is to put your petals on at an angle like that or that. It'll just look odd. Again, make sure that the top of the petal is level with the previous ones, and make sure that is firmly and neatly glued into position. And because you're gluing it at the base, that simulates the fact that the rose is beginning to unfurl. So just so it's easier to put the next petal on, I'm just going to glue that little base down there. But for the second petal, again in the middle of that petal, you put your glue and apply your next petal. So we're working these petals around this central stem. Can you see? Because we've curled that over a little bit, we're beginning to build up the shape of that rose. You do that with the next two, so that you then get something that looks like that, which is quite pretty on its own. And this is the stage where, if you wanted to have a partially open flower, you would then stop at this point and complete it with the sepal and add your leaves. So you'd then get something that looked like this. So for here, when I've applied the sepals, I've glued them about halfway up the plant, up the flower, which is what would happen in practice. I'll show you afterwards how to do a bud, and in a bud you'd use the sepal right to the top of your petals. But as the flower opens, so do the sepals. So in a partially open rose, you put your petals about halfway up. So if that's where you went to stop, that's fine. If not, we'll continue now with the next layer. This next layer is definitely harder to explain than it is to do, but I'm hoping that this method will, if I can explain it, you'll understand where I'm coming from. I've now got, if I can get that into shot, I've got 6 petals, all the same size. So this is petal size number 4, and we need 6 of these for this next layer. And how I've set them out here, imagine this is a clock face. That's 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and we've got about 2 and 4, 10 and 8, and we're going to apply those in that pattern to that rose we've already done. Sounds complicated? It isn't particularly. It's more complicated for me to explain than it is for you to do, and more difficult for me to get all this in camera as I go. So here goes. So thinking of what I've just said, we're going to apply these petals, first of all, that one in the 12 o'clock position. So you tend to do, where you've got 2 petals in the previous layer, you cover that join with your next layer. So that's the first one I'm going to add. So you do it at the base like we've done before. So I'm adding my glue to the base and adding that petal there, making sure again that it's horizontal at the bottom and the top, and that I've glued it into position correctly. I'm going to add a little bit more glue so that it's anchored down. So that is the 12 o'clock petal. You'll notice that I've curled these petals like we've done before. So the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, I've just curled down like so. So the 6 o'clock petal is going to go just about there. It can sometimes be easier to put these petals on holding your flower upside down. So that might be easier for you if you do it that way. Can you see? I'll do this one that way so you can see the difference. You can put your glue all the way around. And we know where my original petal is. This is completely opposite and I'm adding that into position there. So can you see that upside down version? Well, that's what it looks like from the top. You've got a 12 o'clock and a 6 o'clock petal. With the other two, or the other four, I'm going to start with the 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock petals, and I've curled down the edges diagonally like we've done before, and we're going to stick those in the 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock positions on that left hand side, with the curled side on the, do apologise, I'll show you that again. We're going to stick those on that left hand side with the curled edges outwards. So then we're building up those layers. I need to get this into a better shot for you. So we've now got that 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position. We're now going to apply 2 leaves to that left side first in the 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock position, and we're going to need 2 of these petals with the edges curled, and they're going to be applied like that so that the curl is on the left side and the right side. So there are the 2 petals we've just applied, and we're going to apply these now, stick them into position so that you're at 10 o'clock and 8 o'clock. So there's my 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. I'm going to apply this one then again, overlapping it by about a half, keeping that base level and applying that first petal. The base is horizontal yet again, overlapped by about a half, and that curl is to the left hand side. So that's the first one. Make sure it's fully glued down because that's going to be easier for you to apply the next one. And you do the same again, halfway between that petal is where the edge of that next petal is going to go. Apply your glue, and this time that curl is on the right hand side, and you apply your petal in that position. So you've now got that sort of shape. So looking at it from above, that was your original 12 o'clock, your 6 o'clock, and then you've just put those 2 extra petals there. You do the same on the other side, putting your 2 petals like so, gluing them as we've done before, so you then end up with a rose that looks something like that. You then need to apply the final layer, and again you need the same petal size number 4, and just use 3 petals this time. And these I've just curled quite a lot downwards using my wire. So just curled them like that. if you wanted a bigger rose than the one I've done here, then you use the size 5 petal and do the same again, 6 petals in that same configuration as we've just done before you apply this final layer of 3, and that'll give you a far bigger shape rose. This one I definitely think is easier if you turn it upside down and glue it and position the petals this way up. So we've just got 3, so I'm just going to see where I think they look best. And where there's a join, I'm covering that join up. Not so much because I don't like to see a join, but that's the way that petals seem to be on roses. That's the first one. My second one I'm going to put round about here. And my final one on the other side. Definitely the easiest layer we've done so far. Just make sure they're in position, and that just adds a final dimension to that rose. You can see there. So we can leave the rose like that and the petals as they are, or you can make some enhancements to those. If you want to go back and curl some of these leaves a little bit more if they've become unwound, now is your time to do it. What you can do as well, and I'll just show you on this leaf, is probably a good one to do. Another little technique, and I think this makes a gorgeous petal. Roll your petal over your wire and then scrunch it up a little bit so that you then get quite a crinkled leaf, crinkled petal. I'll just roll that down again, this one here. It just adds another little layer of detail to your roses, and it's so simple to do. It just makes it look that little bit more realistic and gives it a different style. So now we just need to finish the rose, and for this, grab yourself a piece of stem tape about 3.5 to 4 inches long. I've cut mine in half, and we're going to make the base of the sepal. So right snug up the top of those petals that you've just done. Apply the stem tape. I think that's going to be enough just there. So you're making the base of your sepal, if I can show you there. Okay. Then take your basic petal, sepal that we've pre-made, little hole in, run that up the centre and gently pull it over that little bit of stem tape so that it sits nice and snug. You could put your sepal on first and then do the stem tape. This, I think, if you can get it, makes a neater join. And then we just need to fix those sepals to the petals. Just need to do it perhaps in a couple of places. And that's really beginning to come together and look like a rose. Now, as we've seen with the semi-open rose, the sepals, as the flower opens, starts to curl back. So if you want to add a little bit of detail and to make that more realistic, you can just begin to roll these sepal, whatever they are, each sepal strand back a little bit onto your rose, because that's what it would do in nature. It protects the bud and the petals as they grow, and then as the flower opens, the petals sort of recede and curl underneath the plant. So you then end up with something that's looking a little bit like that. And the final touch, of course, is to add your leaves. So here's one that I did before, getting myself ready. And I've done the jaggedy edge, like I showed you earlier. That's snipping the edge of the rose one way, tiny little snips, and then going back the other way, just to produce that little raggedy edge. I think it's far better than trying to do a serrated edge fully, which is quite tricky. Put your leaf about 90 degrees to the stem, and this time I'm using a full width of stem tape to hold that leaf in place. And then just to neaten that off, if you wish, what I like to do is to take a half a width stem tape, wrap that around the stem, in between the stem and the leaf, wrap it once round the stem, and then once round the leaf. Get rid of a bit of that little glue there, and then back again round the stem. That way it just neatens off that join. And as usual, because leaves aren't always that flat and shapeless, you can just adjust the shape of your leaf and bend it with that wire to get the shape that you want. So there you have it, the basic rose, step-by-step instructions, supported by a pattern and written instructions. Apologies for dodgy camera angles. Doing it whilst filming through a phone camera I've found really tricky, but if you follow those instructions, this video and the pattern, you should end up with a rose that looks like that. So stick around for part 2, when I'll show you how you need to change what we've just done to get flowers that look like these. To make a bud to go with your basic rose, all you need is the central core that we've done before, one of the bud sepals, that's slightly smaller than the one we've just used, again a little bit of stem tape and tape to attach your leaves. So first of all, once you've got your bud, your core, use your little bit of floral stem tape around the base of the bud. It gives you that little unique sepal shape at the bottom. And then because I'm using this wire for this one, it's far easier to thread through than if you're using one of these, this is a gardening stake that you'd pop in your garden. It's a good thing to use for stem, but it is quite thick. Whereas this, I can get this through right to the end and then just gently work that through. And just gently pulling that through, making a little hole so that, can you see, So that floral tape is now at the base of the sepal. And then I definitely use craft glue for this bit on a bud, because what we're going to do is almost sculpt this into position. Let's try and do it opposite. It won't be exactly opposite because there's 5 of these strands to the sepal. And then what I tend to do, this is why I've always got mucky fingers on these videos, I'm just then going to smooth the base of that sepal with a little bit of glue and smooth it where those sepal strands overlap, so they're a little bit smoother. But I think you can see now how easy that was, and yet how pretty it is, making that little rosebud. And if you wanted to, well, you can add your leaves on just the same as we did before, with a bit of stem tape. If I can find the edge of my stem tape here. Why can you never find the edge when you need it? Good grief. See how pretty that looks, that little bud? Even better when you give him a little leaf. Even buds have leaves. So you apply those exactly in the same way, anchoring it firmly with your stem tape. And then twist and pull all the way down the stem. Finishing off as we did before. You can leave it like this if you wish, or finish it off as we did before by tidying that little join up. So you've got your fully open rose, your bud, and if you wanted to as well, stop after the second layer and apply a sepal so that you've got a partially open rose, and for that your sepal needs to be glued about halfway up, so not right the way up like in the bud, not curled up underneath like that one, but partly halfway up, and you've then got a lovely little trio of basic roses.